Network access is disabled by default in Adobe Premiere Pro UXP plugins. Today I'm going to show you guys exactly how to enable network access for your plugins. I'm going to show you guys how to do it securely. I'm going to talk a little bit about the manifest.json file, which is responsible for all of this stuff. Welcome back to Programming for Adobe. My name is Tommy, and I'm here to teach you guys all about developing plugins for Adobe products. So I've got this new component that's part of my Hello World plugin. And what we want to do is pull in some data from the internet. The internet can make our plugins a lot more interesting. We don't just have to interact with the file system. We can pull down data from a website. We can upload stuff. Really, it gives us a lot of flexibility. And if we take a look at this component here, what's happening is I'm doing a fetch request to a website called JSON Placeholder. JSON Placeholder is just a stand-in for any kind of API. It just returns some dummy data that we can use. And let me show you that. So you can imagine your plugin, you would display this somewhere so that your user could see this information. We're using the fetch API here, which is standard in most JavaScript runtimes. I should point out that while what we're looking at here is React code, and while this code would likely work in a web browser, when you're running UXP plugins, the runtime is not a web browser. Adobe has their own implementation of Chromium and these old web technologies, and things don't necessarily behave as you would expect. Regardless, this component, when it loads, is going to call out to JSON Placeholder, grab the user data, and then it's going to display it so that we can take a look at it. Why don't we go and load this plugin? I've already got it built, and we're going to see what happens. We're back in UXP Developer Tools, and to load the plugin, we can just hit load over here. So I click load, and I can see the panel popping up, and that's a good thing. But if we take a look at the actual text in the panel, we're noticing that fetch threw an error. And the error is telling us that the plugin is not permitted to access network APIs. It's telling us something about required permissions.network, and we need to look in the manifest to find that. And this is what I mean when I say that Adobe UXP has its own runtime that's different than a web browser. If you ran this code in a web browser, if you made this fetch request in a web browser, it would work completely fine. When you're making a call via fetch, it doesn't work exactly like it does in the web browser. Instead, Adobe's blocking network requests by default. So how do you actually access the network then? Well, as the error message clued us in, we need to look in the manifest. The manifest.json file is how UXP Developer Tools loads and unloads plugins. It has a bunch of information about how to launch the plugin, the size of the windows, and crucially for us, the network permissions. The dist folder has the build output. We're not interested in changing that right now. We want to change the source code. So let's take a look at manifest.json here. And don't worry about all of these fields. I'll drop a link in the description of this video to the full reference with Adobe. But just know that this is the first file that gets read when you load a UXP plugin. And you're going to see stuff like the name and the ID of the plugin. We'll also see things like the host app version. If you remember when we created a plugin using the UXP Developer Tools template, it asked us for some of this information, and that's what we filled in there. It's also got a path to the main. This is going to tell UXP exactly where to start execution of the plugin. In our case, that's index.html. And if you look at the distribution, you'll actually see index.html here. That's what's going to get invoked when the plugin loads. Let's peek down here, and we'll notice that there's this required permissions object within the JSON. We'll take a look at WebView here. It has a list of domains, and it says allow here. And as you might have guessed, this is a whitelist. This is a whitelist of websites that we're allowed to embed via the HTML WebView tag. That is different than making a network request. What we need to do here is add a network section to this required permissions JSON object. And we need to explicitly whitelist the JSON placeholder domain so that Adobe will allow us to make those requests. So we're going to copy in some code here that's going to make this easier. Now I've added this network block here and copied in the JSON placeholder domain. This wildcard at the end is telling Adobe to allow access to any URL that's in the JSON placeholder domain, not just the root. Now that we've added this into the network section, what we're going to do is rebuild the plugin. So we're going to run an npm run build. That seemed like it worked. We're going to check in dist just to confirm that it got built correctly. We're going to look at the manifest. And yes, we see this network section now. So why don't we go and reload and unload the plugin? Let's hit reload. We're still getting the error when we reload. It turns out that Adobe UXP Developer Tools, at least at the time of recording this video, does not by default reload the manifest.json. So what we're going to have to do here is unload and now load. And now what we're going to notice in the plugin is we finally got the data from JSON placeholder. If we go over back to our Chrome, we'll notice that these names here are exactly the same as what we're seeing in the app now. So this manifest.json file is where you're going to look if you need to modify the network permission settings. I should point out that you can make it a little more permissive with wildcards if you want. If you did something like this, star.com. This would actually allow any website that ended in .com to be a valid network request, and Adobe wouldn't stop you. It's up to you if you want to do this. I don't personally recommend this level of security. I don't think this is secure enough. However, it can be pretty annoying if you have to whitelist every single individual URL. So up to you as the developer, up to you as the person creating this plugin if you want to do this. Also note that this web view section is different than network. We already had, when I ran the plugin first, this JSON placeholder entry in the web view section. Web view is something you can embed into your panel. If you wanted to embed an iframe of another website into your panel, you would need to explicitly whitelist it in this configuration here. I'll make some more videos in the future about manifest.json. There's a lot we could talk about. There's a lot more configuration going on. I will also point out that the panel, the size of it, the name of it, the location, all of that stuff is configurable here in the manifest.json as well, among a lot of other stuff. Hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. We'll see you next time.